I want to tell you about something I witnessed that still haunts me in the most beautiful, heartbreaking way possible. It happened 3 years ago, but I remember it like it was this morning. Every detail, every emotion, every moment that made my chest tight. A woman who sold oranges on the street corner saved a man's life. She had nothing. She gave everything. And now 3 families are in court fighting over who gets to claim her as their own. And I swear to you, when I first heard what was happening, I felt physically sick. If you've ever watched someone do the right thing and then get punished for it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from right now. I need to know I'm not alone in feeling this.
Her name was Grace Obioma. I'll never forget that name. She was 52 years old and had been selling oranges at the same intersection in Port Harcourt for almost 20 years. Every single day. Rain or shine, heat or flood. The kind of woman you see but don't really see, you know? The kind of woman the world has learned to look past. But Grace had this smile. God, she had this smile that could break your heart and put it back together at the same time. I met Grace 2 months after it all happened, when someone told me I needed to hear her story. And when I sat down with her in that tiny room she rented, walls stained with mildew, a single mattress on the floor, a crucifix on the wall, I felt something I hadn't felt in years of practice. I felt small, humbled, like I was sitting in the presence of something holy that had nothing to do with religion and everything to do with what it means to be human. Grace didn't have children. She'd lost her husband to malaria 11 years before. She had a sister in Owerri who called once a year, maybe. She had neighbors who knew her name, but not her story. And she had her corner, her oranges, her routine. Psychologically, this is what we call a stable poverty loop, when survival becomes so consuming that hope shrinks down to just getting through the day. Grace wasn't depressed. She wasn't broken. She was just existing, one day at a time, one sale at a time. And then everything changed. It was a Wednesday, mid-afternoon. Grace remembers because Wednesdays were always slow. People holding on to their money, waiting for the weekend. She was sitting on her wooden crate, peeling an orange for herself, when she heard the screech, that terrible sound of tires fighting asphalt, then the thud. She said it wasn't loud, but it echoed in her bones. You know that feeling when sound becomes something you feel in your body? That's what she described to me. She looked up. A black SUV had hit a motorcycle. The bike was on its side, wheels still spinning, and there was a man lying in the middle of the road, not moving. Grace told me she froze. Just for a second. She froze because her brain was trying to decide, is this real? Do I move? What do I do? That's the amygdala, the fear center of your brain, taking over. It floods your system with adrenaline and cortisol, and for just a moment, you're paralyzed. Fight, flight, or freeze. Grace froze. But only for a second. Then she stood up. She didn't think, she didn't plan, she just moved. Her legs carried her into the road. Cars were honking, people were shouting. The driver of the SUV was stumbling out of his car, hands shaking, mumbling something about the man swerving into his lane. But Grace didn't hear any of it. She was kneeling next to the man, and there was blood. So much blood. His name was Chidi Okafor, 47 years old, a banker, married, 3 kids, on his way home from work, and he was dying. Grace pressed her hands against the wound on his abdomen. She didn't know what she was doing, not really, but instinct told her to apply pressure. Her orange-stained hands, calloused and rough, were now red with his blood. She was talking to him. Stay with me. Stay with me. You hear me? Stay with me. Chitty's eyes were open but unfocused. His breathing was shallow, rapid. Medically, he was going into hypovolemic shock, his body shutting down from blood loss. He had maybe minutes, maybe less. And you want to know what happened? People stood there. They stood there and watched. Some took out their phones and started recording. Others shook their heads and walked away. One man shouted, "Don't touch him, you'll be blamed." Another woman yelled, "Leave him, this is not your problem." But Grace didn't leave. She looked up at the crowd and screamed. This woman who had been invisible for 20 years, she screamed, "Someone call an ambulance, now!" Nobody moved. So she made a choice that would cost her everything. She looked at the driver of the SUV, a young man in his 20s, pale and trembling. She said, "Help me get him in your car." The driver shook his head. "No, I can't. They'll say We are not letting him die here. Help me." Something in her voice cut through his panic. Together they lifted Chitty, this stranger, this dying man, and put him in the back seat of the SUV. Grace climbed in with him, cradling his head in her lap, pressing her wrapper against his wound, whispering prayers and pleas and promises she had no power to keep. The hospital was 12 minutes away. Grace counted every second. She felt his pulse weakening under her fingertips. She watched his lips turn pale, and she refused to let him go. Have you ever held a stranger's life in your hands? Have you ever felt that weight? Tell me in the comments. Because what Grace felt in that moment, that primal, desperate need to save someone, that's not learned. That's not taught. That's the deepest part of our humanity, breaking through everything else.
They got to the hospital. Grace burst through those doors screaming for help, blood all over her clothes, her face, her hands. The nurses came running. They took Chitty straight into surgery. And Grace collapsed in the waiting room. She sat there for 6 hours, alone. The SUV driver had disappeared the moment they arrived. No one knew who he was. No one asked. She just sat there in her blood-stained clothes, shaking, praying, waiting. A nurse finally came out. Chitty had survived. The surgery was successful. He'd lost a dangerous amount of blood, but he was stable. He was alive. Grace cried. She told me she cried so hard she couldn't breathe. Not because she knew him, not because he was family, but because he was alive, because she had done something that mattered, because for the first time in years, she felt like her life had purpose. And then the bill came. The hospital needed 350,000 naira up front for the surgery, medication, and recovery. Chitty's family hadn't arrived yet. No one knew who he was. The hospital looked at Grace, this woman in blood-soaked clothes who brought him in, and they said, "You brought him. You're responsible."
Can you believe that? She saved his life, and they told her she owed them money. Money she didn't have, money she'd never seen in her entire life. Grace tried to explain, "I don't know him, I just helped him. I'm just—" But they didn't care. "Ma, if you cannot pay, we'll have to discharge him. We need the bed." And here's where the psychology gets cruel. Grace's brain was now stuck in what we call a moral injury loop. She'd done the right thing. She'd saved a life. And now she was being punished for it. Her nervous system couldn't reconcile it. Her mind kept asking, "Why? Why am I being punished? What did I do wrong?" And when your brain can't answer that question, it starts to internalize shame. It starts to believe maybe you were wrong to help. Maybe you should have walked away like everyone else. But Grace didn't walk away. She went back to her corner. She sold every single orange she had. She begged neighbors. She asked strangers. She stood outside that hospital for 3 days, asking anyone who passed by to help. And slowly, painfully, humiliatingly, she scraped together 60,000 naira. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. But it was everything she had. She gave it to the hospital, and she told them, "Please, I'll get the rest. Just don't let him die. Please." Then Chidi's family arrived. His wife, Monica, his mother, his 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, the youngest maybe 6 years old. They came rushing into that hospital, frantic, terrified, desperate for answers. And when they found out what happened, when they learned that a stranger, a street hawker, had saved their husband, their son, their father, they wept. Monica found Grace sitting outside the hospital, exhausted, still in her stained clothes. And this woman, this elegant, educated woman, knelt down in front of Grace and held her hands. She said, "You gave me my husband back. You gave my children their father. I don't know how to thank you." The family paid the hospital bill immediately. They bought Grace new clothes. They insisted she come home with them, eat with them, rest. For the first time in decades, Grace sat at a table with a family, a real family. She ate rice and chicken. She laughed. She felt seen. Chidi recovered, slowly but fully. And when he was strong enough to speak, he called Grace to his bedside and said, "You are my angel. I owe you my life." The family didn't just thank her. They transformed her life. They set her up with a small shop. They paid her rent for a year. They invited her to their home for every holiday, every celebration. Grace became part of their family. She called Monica sister. The children called her Auntie Grace. She finally had a place, a purpose, a family.
And for one beautiful year, Grace was happy. But she didn't know what was waiting just around the corner. Chidi's mother, Mama Okafor, was a woman of tradition, old values, strong opinions, and she believed in something called life debt. In her culture, if someone saves your life, they become spiritually bound to your family forever. It's not just gratitude, it's obligation. She started telling people that Grace wasn't just a helper. She was now family, blood family. And when Mama Okafor's health started declining, diabetes, high blood pressure, kidney issues, she decided that Grace should be the one to care for her. Not Monica, not a nurse, Grace. Monica tried to protest. "Mama, Grace has her own life now. We've helped her, but we can't." But Mama Okafor wouldn't hear it. "She saved my son. She is ours now. She will take care of me." And Grace didn't know how to say no. After years of being invisible, after finally being loved and accepted, how could she say no? So she agreed. She moved into Mama Okafor's home. She became her full-time caregiver. But here's where things got complicated. Grace's sister, the one who barely called, heard about what happened. She heard that Grace was now living with a wealthy family, that they'd given her money, a shop, support. And suddenly, after years of silence, she appeared. Her name was Nkechi, and she showed up at Chidi's house one afternoon with her 2 sons, claiming that Grace had abandoned her family. "She's my sister. She belongs with us. You people have stolen her from her real family." Stolen her? This woman who hadn't called Grace in 3 years, who didn't come to her husband's funeral, who never once asked if she needed help, now she's talking about family? But it didn't stop there.
His extended family, his uncle, his cousins, they started showing up too. They heard there was a woman who belonged to the family now. A woman with no husband, no children, and they started asking, when Grace dies, who inherits her shop, her savings? Do you hear what I'm saying? They were already planning her death, already fighting over what she'd leave behind. This woman who had nothing, who gave everything, and now people were circling her like vultures. Monica saw what was happening, and she made a decision. She went to a lawyer and said, I want to adopt Grace, legally, as my sister, so no one can use her, so she's protected. And that's when everything exploded. Nkechi filed a lawsuit. You can't adopt my sister. She's already my family. Mama Okafor filed a counterclaim. She saved my son. She belongs to our lineage. And Chidi's uncle filed his own motion, claiming that since Grace had no legal heirs, the family needed to establish guardianship over her assets for her own protection. 3 families, fighting in court, over a woman who just wanted to sell oranges in peace. Grace sat in that courtroom. I was there, I saw her. And she looked so small, so tired, so betrayed. She wasn't a person to them anymore. She was a possession, a prize, a problem to be solved. And the worst part? The worst part is that the one family who actually cared about her, Monica and Chidi, they were being painted as manipulators, as people trying to steal Grace from her real family.
I'm going to tell you how this ended. But first, I need you to understand something about the human mind, about trauma and ownership and love. When Grace saved Chidi's life, her brain released oxytocin, the bonding hormone, the same chemical that floods a mother's body when she holds her baby for the first time. Grace bonded with Chidi in that moment. Not romantically, not even consciously, but deeply, neurologically. She became attached to his survival. And when his family embraced her, her brain, her starving, lonely, neglected brain, latched onto that love like oxygen. For the first time in years, she felt safe, valued, needed. But the people fighting over her, they weren't bonded to her. They were bonded to what she represented: control, status, money, obligation. That's the difference between love and ownership. Love asks, what do you need? Ownership asks, what do I get? The court case dragged on for 8 months. 8 months of lawyers and claims and counterclaims. Grace stopped going to her shop. She stopped smiling. She told me, I wish I had just walked away. I wish I had let him die. Do you understand what that means? This woman, who did the most beautiful, selfless thing a human can do, was wishing she'd let a man die, because saving him had destroyed her. I worked with Grace during those months. We talked about guilt, about boundaries, about the difference between kindness and self-destruction. I watched her learn something painful, that not everyone who calls you family loves you, and not everyone who loves you deserves access to your life. The judge finally ruled, and he did something unusual. He dismissed all claims. He said, Grace Obioma is a grown woman. She is not property. She is not an inheritance. She does not belong to anyone. She belongs to herself. He granted her full legal autonomy and advised her to create a will and assign power of attorney to someone she trusted. Not someone who claimed her, someone she chose. Grace chose Monica, not because Monica was fighting for her, but because Monica was the only one who asked her, what do you want, Grace? What do you want? And you know what Grace wanted? She wanted her corner back, her oranges, her peace. So she left. She thanked Monica and Chidi, she hugged the children, and she went back to her corner. Not because she had to, because she chose to. She still sells oranges. I visited her last month. She's 55 now.
Her hands are still stained, her smile is still there, but it's different. Wiser, sadder, stronger. I asked her, "Do you regret it, saving him?" And she looked at me with those eyes that have seen too much, and she said, "No. I regret that people made me question if I should have." So let me tell you what I learned from Grace, what I need you to hear. Doing the right thing will not always reward you. Sometimes it will cost you. Sometimes it will hurt you. Sometimes people will punish you for your goodness and call it love. But that doesn't mean you stop being good. It means you get better at protecting yourself while you're being good. Grace saved a man's life. That was beautiful. That was right. But she also learned that she needed to save herself, that her kindness couldn't come at the cost of her dignity, that love without boundaries isn't love, it's consumption. If you're someone who gives and gives and gives, if you're the person people call when they need something but never when you need something, I need you to hear this. Your kindness is not a debt. Your compassion is not an obligation. You do not owe people access to your life just because you helped them once. You can be kind and have boundaries. You can love people and still protect yourself. You can save someone's life and still walk away when they try to own you. And if you've ever been in Grace's position, if you've ever done something beautiful and watched people turn it ugly, I want you to know it wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You just learned a hard truth about human nature. Some people see goodness and want to protect it. Other people see goodness and want to possess it. Your job is to know the difference. Your job is to surround yourself with people who celebrate you, not people who claim you. People who ask what you need, not what they can take. Grace is free now. Not because she has money, not because she's famous, but because she finally understands that she doesn't owe anyone her life, not even the man she saved. She gave him his life back, and then she took her own life back. And that's the real miracle. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If this story meant something to you, let me know in the comments. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you're feeling. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. You're not alone. I see you. And your goodness matters, even when it costs you. Even when it costs you. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.